Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Fintech and Cloud Adoption in the Age of COVID-19. My name is Flach. I am the Global Marketing Director at BSO, a technology partner of AWS, and are therefore all the more excited to be joined today by Kathryn van Nuys, who's the Head of Fintech Startups at AWS. Hi Kathryn, welcome. How are you today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing well.
Where are you joining us from today?
So I'm based in New York.
Great. How has the move been to sort of working from home at AWS?
For me, I think AWS, we had that type of culture where it was pretty easy to work from home and had VPN and secure remote access. So it actually ended up being pretty seamless, being able to just work remotely. It was just more, the change is more not seeing your colleagues. That's been a little bit challenging and missing out on that collaboration. And then of course, being in a small New York City apartment and having to move out to stay at my parents, which I haven't done in 20 years with my family to have some space, but but we're making it through, and we're lucky we were able to do that.
Yes, I can relate to that. I always say if I'd known that my new home where I moved in beginning of this year would be my home office, yoga studio, and various other functions, I probably would have looked for something a little bit bigger.
Exactly.
But yeah, that is the new normal that we're in. Without further ado, Kathryn, over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about your role at AWS?
Sure. So, leading fintech business development at AWS, and for those of you who I think you're all fairly familiar with cloud, but AWS offers a great value proposition for our customers with low cost, easy to use infrastructure for building and growing their businesses. And so we provide the global, secure, reliant infrastructure for companies to get up and running immediately. And so I'm part of the startup organization that supports our customers from the very early stages all the way through the different phases of growth. So from just getting started to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue wouldn't normally be considered a startup, but all fall within our group. And so our AWS startup team partners with startups around the world to build, launch, grow, and scale their business. And so we don't just support our customers with cloud infrastructure. It's certainly the core of what we do, but we also partner with our startup customers through their journey by providing resources to tackle challenges from early stage fundraising to building technical teams and even developing startup culture. So in my role, focus within that very specifically on fintech and how can we help them achieve success through all the different capabilities we offer. And so household names are building on AWS, such as Affirm or Klarna, Coinbase or TransferWise, and many others.
Sounds exciting. And what brought you there? Where did you work before AWS? What was your journey?
Sure. So my journey, I started off in more traditional financial services, so in capital markets and then sales and trading at Citigroup and at Lehman Brothers. And then I ended up finding my way into startups and then fintech specifically, where I ran capital markets and business development for a couple of lending startups before I joined AWS about 2.5 years ago.
Great. So we said, one of the many advantages of cloud is that cloud computing provides companies with the ability to easily scale up and down when demand changes, and depending how much compute is needed, and without having to commit large upfront capital and cost, before. So it sounds like a dream to any startup. And we often speak about startups being cloud native, fintechs included. So Kathryn, what does this actually mean, being cloud native, and how do you support startups specifically in setting up their cloud infrastructure?
Yeah, so I think being cloud native means that, for us, we always talk about with startups and that they often just started building right out on the cloud from day one and never went out and bought servers. But we also do have customers that have since migrated over to a cloud first solution. So I think just not having that large capital expenditure, as you mentioned, and having that variable cost of cloud has really been a game changer, and just allowing startups to get up and running quickly. And then they're able to focus on what differentiate their businesses and not sort of maintaining the servers and then needing a team for that. And so when you think about sort of cloud native startups and how can we support those businesses, at the very early stages, we provide them just like technical help, training, certification, so they can really understand AWS and what the offering looks like, and then even credit so they can sort of help get up and running. Specific to fintech, we also have a team of compliance experts, and they work with our customers to help them understand the various regulations and best practices for building their technology on AWS. So as everyone on the call knows, security and compliance are of utmost importance for anyone that's anyone in financial services, whether you're a very small company or the largest global banks. And so we have customers such as Upstart or Root Insurance that handle consumer customer data, or fintechs that sell to enterprises and likewise need to make sure they have top-notch security and data privacy. So we kind of work with them to create the appropriate security and compliance posture to protect customer data. So, I think one of the reasons that fintechs choose to build on AWS is they have access immediately when you get building to a global infrastructure that's built for resiliency and that satisfies our most security sensitive customers. So we have large global banks and government organizations that all build on us, and you sort of benefit from everything we learn from serving all of our millions of customers. And so one other thing I think that's worth mentioning is we also have a pretty large financial services organization. So I'm focused on startups, but I work very closely with that team, especially as we have fintechs that are looking to partner or maybe sell into banks, capital markets, insurance customers. And so we do a lot of work with our B2B fintechs and think about enterprise readiness. We actually have programs where we help customers go to market called our AWS Partner Network. And then you really just support different go-to-market initiatives that they have. And so maybe I'll end this by talking about one customer. Many of you are familiar with Stripe. And so they are cloud native. They started building their PCI compliant payment platform on AWS since 2011. And they rely on what I just talked about, security best practices, the easy auditability of our platform. And they've been able to scale from being, small when they started to now handle billions of dollars every year in over 40 countries.
Okay, wow. What a journey, right? Yeah, no, they're obviously huge. And I think, we know financial services is one of the most regulated sectors. So it must be key for any fintech, being regulated to work with a company that really knows what the requirements are there and how to be compliant. So yeah, it makes absolute sense. So now moving over to that new normal that we're working in. So a clear winner from the coronavirus lockdown has been cloud computing, as organizations have transitioned from physical to virtual offices and remote working. How can companies utilize cloud technology to support the new remote world of work? And in your day-to-day, have you seen an increase in demand for the cloud since COVID-19 hit?
Sure. So absolutely, we've seen we continue to see an increase in demand. And, I think one of the key aspect, as you mentioned, of this new normal is companies having to manage a majority or a vast majority of their workforce being remote. And so actually our startup customers, a lot of that I've spoken to, we have CTO roundtables where we speak to our customers. They've actually handled that shift pretty seamlessly. And it's more about being able to scale up or down depending on how the demands on their business have changed. And so I think that's why it's so important. Like when you think about cloud versus on-prem is, what we call like the old world and on-prem, when you needed to scale and you need to add capacity, say all of a sudden your payment volumes are going through the roof and you need to get more capacity, it might take 10 to 18 weeks. And so you also then had to over provision to kind of manage this change in activity. And so I think that's what we've seen, like companies that are already building on AWS have been able to much more seamlessly meet that. And if their demand for their businesses have unfortunately kind of gone down, at least they can kind of scale back and save those costs. But when you think about, financial services, we've been working with customers to enable remote work or maintain, the resiliency of mission critical applications as the business is changing, maybe scale market systems to process exceptional volumes that we're seeing. And so we offer, one of the things we've seen as an increased demand is something we offer called the well-architected framework. And this is just a consistent approach where we help customers build resilient, secure, high-performing applications. And so a lot of companies are looking to this now to make sure they're increasing their security and really following all the best practices as they've had this real shift to remote work. We've also, the multi-factor authentication has been another kind of key thing that's happened. So we work with a few global financial institutions to help them with this as they needed to roll it out quickly for remote access for their employees. Another thing with this change to kind of not only remote work, but then it's, branches closing and just the move to digital is, we have a service called Amazon Connect, and that helps businesses stand up fully operational contact centers in minutes. And then you can operate it really virtually anywhere. And so with this shift to needing to engage with customers digitally, we're seeing a lot of increased demand for this type of service. The National Australia Bank is one of the customers, and they're lowering costs and actually bringing in additional data to be able to kind of better engage with and serve customers using this service. So I guess, and
Okay.
finally, like one other is a BBVA. So when you think about these global institutions, they all of a sudden needed to find a solution to quickly implement, roll out globally to all the different countries in which it operates, and then meet the security and regulatory requirements. And so we help them build out a solution for their remote work and reduce implementation time by 90% compared to an on-premise project. So yeah,
Okay,
we definitely seen an increased need for our services.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's really shows it's not only for startups, right? It's independent of size and life cycle, given the volatile world that we live in. Cloud is what will really enable businesses to adapt and flex much more quickly to that environment. And I had a little look around the stats this morning, and I found an analyst study that said that global spending on cloud services increased by 34% in the first quarter of 2020. So growing the cloud infrastructure market to $31 billion in the first quarter of 2020. So really reflecting that demand of businesses for online collaboration tools, e-commerce, and working remotely and all of that. I think at BSO, we've really seen it as well because, access to data centers has just not been there during the lockdown. Then here that the cloud really shows that flexibility of not having to manage physical servers and operate the infrastructure. So there's been an increase in demand to all the managed services, but also connectivity to the public cloud. Kathryn, we both have worked in investment banking and fintech. I think we know they're very connected sectors, and we know there's some barriers to adoption of cloud computing and other emerging technologies in capital markets. I've worked in blockchain for a while, and there were some barriers at the time. At the same time, a lot has happened in the past few years, so such as regulation, a lack of awareness of the benefits to the industry, the complexity of existing legacy systems, which have built up with mergers and acquisitions over the past 40 years, and concerns around financial grade security and safe handling of client data. So looking at the incumbents, have you seen an uptake to the cloud, and has this been accelerated by COVID as well?
Yeah, so I think, so I've been at AWS about 2.5 years, and it's been an accelerating trend since I've joined, and probably well before then. So I'd say that, through the infrastructure we provide, the internal expertise, the partners we offer, we have earned the trust of some of the largest banks, broker dealers, market centers in the world. So for those of you that don't know, companies like Allianz and Barclays and Goldman Sachs, HSBC, NASDAQ, Santander, and many others are all, we're proud to call AWS customers. And so I think that migration to the cloud has been consistently gaining momentum pre-COVID. It's just such a strong value proposition. It's not really an if, just a when, and sort of how companies are going about that transition. Mm-hmm. And so if you look across financial services, the vast majority are considering or already implementing, and I think we probably saw that in the poll results, cloud is a major part of their IT strategy going forward. And so we actually work with a customer called Cutover. They're a work orchestration platform. One of their big use cases is big cloud migrations. And so they've been gaining a ton of traction. They had a number of financial services companies invested in them, including Barclays. And so I think that just goes to show that there's more and more of those types of services because they're needed, because there are more of these big cloud migrations happening. And I think when you look at COVID, I think that just accelerated this move to digital and highlighted the ways, which we've talked about a little bit, about why cloud is critical to enable financial institutions to be more agile. So if you have to adapt to this fast changing environment, you want to innovate on behalf of your customers and meet their changing needs. And then also, I think what's key is using advanced analytical tools to create better insights to help serve or work with their customers. And so, so we already sort of talked about the scaling their infrastructure and why that's important. I think the other thing is around using, how can you innovate faster on behalf of your customers? And so AWS offers over 190 services, and we keep adding features and more services in an accelerating pace. And that's important because when, with this technology offering, instantly available, banks, capital markets firms, asset managers can then react to customer expectations and build new solutions in record time and have access to sort of the most up-to-date technology at that time. So an example around kind of a company, a financial institution that has used AWS to kind of build, rewards programs and product recommendations is Emirates NBD. And so we actually have a service called Amazon Personalize, which is an AI service that was built over 20 years of recommendation experience at Amazon. And so that helps firms develop personalized product and content recommendations. And so they actually built a personal finance manager with an automated self-learning system to predict an individual customer needs and then match them to the most appropriate solution. So we've seen sort of a shift to companies really wanting to engage a little bit more deeper and meaningfully with their customers. And then I think the last thing is the using data and analytics at scale, which is particularly, I think, important right now. So data is changing rapidly after COVID, and whether maybe it's spending patterns or how credit risks have evolved. And so those that can, change in response to this more quickly are going to win. And so, and I think it's never been easier to kind of collect, store, analyze, disseminate data than with AWS. And I think that's not only because it's the cost effective doing it in the cloud, but then you also have sort of the suite of analytic services available, which really changes the possibilities of what you can do. And so I guess the last example here would be a company called Starling Bank, and they use transactional data to help customers with insights into their spending and enable them to make better financial decisions. So they take, every single transaction that one of their customers have, they take it and augment it with data, run different analytics and machine learning services, and then generate helpful insights into the financial situation of their customers. So to have this more, this better relationship and better serve their customers. So, so absolutely, that's just like some of the reasons we're seeing this like continued acceleration of cloud adoption and cloud migration.
Absolutely. So it's not just about the cutting costs, which is obviously an advantage of not paying what you use, not having to pay billions up front, making huge investments, capital investments, but also it's about the innovating for the customer itself, right? And if you think about capital markets, looking at even some traders are working from home now, right? We never thought that it'd be possible, but now it's shown it is, and logging in through their virtual machines and VPNs. But who knows? Maybe those voice and electronic trading systems will move to the cloud as well at one point. Obviously, having to make sure that there is a secure, low latency access, ensuring the regulatory compliance, etc. But yeah, and looking at Starling, that's obviously a challenger bank in the UK that we all know, next to Monzo and the big ones, and it's great to see what sort of innovations can be done for the customer in that field. So I think now is a good moment to kick off our first poll. So there's two questions. One of them, which everyone should see now, is: in your business, was cloud part of your IT infrastructure strategy before COVID? And what's your key priority when it comes to cloud networking connectivity? So if everyone could give their vote now. Okay, so I shall read out the responses then. The red answer is that has the majority of votes in the first one, which means that yes, cloud strategy was already important and part of everyone's IT infrastructure pre-COVID and will continue to be post-COVID. Not surprised given the audience that we have on here. And looking at the network connectivity, we can see that security is absolute key, which is also not surprising. And then latency, those might be the BSO customers dialing in there as well. So many of our customers are looking for a secure connection, which an internet-based connection to the cloud cannot always offer. So here we've got a private dedicated connection to public clouds, that are far more secure, and also in terms of latency, using our global low latency backbone, which we've used for the past 16 years for our core target audience, providing ultra low latency services. That's a topic that we'll touch upon a little bit later today as well. But thank you very much. That's really interesting. Interesting we don't have throughput and hardly any reliability on here. Very interesting. Anything you wanted to add to that, Kathryn?
No, certainly not surprising that most are looking at the cloud security. Something, you know, as I talked a little bit about, it's of utmost concern and should be, and that's why we work very closely with customers. And yeah, we definitely should talk about the latency, because that's definitely an area we're seeing a lot of increased engagement with our customers on.
Let's talk about the latency then. So in terms of connectivity to the cloud, what do you see? You know, we've had those 4 factors in the poll: latency, security, throughput, and reliability. What drives your customers when looking at cloud connectivity?
Yes, I think, you know, I think part of why AWS is the clear leader has been it's the most secure, the most reliant cloud infrastructure, and has such a global footprint. You know, I think historically, when you look at the cloud, lower, like very latency sensitive customers have always have not engaged, or it hasn't been their kind of first choice. But I think what we're seeing more and more is actually engaging with customers around this. So the Singapore Exchange, for example, is building on AWS. There's, especially with these new digital cryptocurrency exchanges, CoinJar is also built on AWS, where latency was pretty critical. A company that is newer to me, I just sort of heard about them in the last few months, is Atom Asset. So if you're not familiar, they're a trading platform that brings, you know, institutional grade performance to retail investors, but also provides digital sort of access to digital assets for institutional investors. And so they came to AWS to ensure security, but also have a latency target below 500 milliseconds. So they were, you know, we worked very closely with them to make sure, because that was one of their key parameters. All of those have case studies on our website. And we offer a service called AWS Outpost. So that's a fully managed service that allows a customer to have the same AWS infrastructure, services, APIs, and tools in virtually any data center or co-location space. And so that's ideal for workloads that require, you know, extremely low latency, or access to on-premise systems, or maybe there's local data processing or data residency requirements, which happens in certain countries. So we've seen like that, we built that service and have seen, you know, increasing engagement there for customers that want sort of the benefits of AWS, but also, you know, have some of those things they have to think about.
Great. Yes. I mean, I'd absolutely echo that in terms of what we see from our customers as more institutional investors also enter you mentioned cryptocurrency exchanges and the digital asset space. We connect them to those crypto exchanges, which are often hosted by AWS and in the cloud, and connect those from the traditional capital markets data centers at fixed low latency capacity into the public cloud. And that using the low latency backbone that we use for our traditional services, combined with the 40 plus on-ramps that we have to the various public cloud providers. So it's interesting that there's definitely a move in the market here, and a need for new products, trying to escape the sun that's clearly come up here in my face, and a clear need for not only secure and private connections, but also at a higher speed.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So we have almost come to the end. So let's see if we can answer a couple of the audience questions. Right. So we've got a question on AI specifically and use cases in fintech. How is AWS helping customers implementing those solutions?
Oh boy, so this could be its own webinar. So let me try and be succinct. So I think, so at AWS we have you know, and a plethora of services and resources and machine learning and artificial intelligence services, and so I sit within Fintech business development. There's a machine learning business development team that's global, service teams, account managers that work with our customers to implement different solutions. And so I think when you think about the key use cases that we've been seeing, it's primarily around some of the things I've talked about, which is customer experience, pricing and product recommendations. Document processing has been huge, like, and especially kind of bringing in unstructured data, trading and analytics, and then compliance, surveillance, fraud detection. And so I guess for this audience, trading and analytics is probably pretty important. And so some of the stuff that we've been seeing is applying machine learning to alternative data sets. We actually have something called the AWS Data Exchange, which allows companies to, if you're a data provider, you can sort of sell your data so other customers can buy it and then seamlessly, compliantly, and securely bring it into their own AWS environment. So we're seeing companies look at alternative data sets, whether it's satellite imagery to predict crop yields, or count the number of cars in a parking lot to predict sales, or sentiment analysis on different media feeds, and predictive analytics. So that's sort of been a lot of the key areas that we've been seeing with customers around trading and analytics.
Great. So a real enabler of innovation, analytics in the cloud in terms of big data, etc. Unprecedented. So we'll cover one more question. So this one is on open banking. What, if any, impact has open banking had on your customers? So that's referring to the directive that was passed in the UK a couple of years ago, PSD2, right, which came into effect to open up banking data to third-party providers. And I remember it was a huge shift in the fintech space. Have you seen impact on your customers?
So I think that, AWS and solutions that are built on AWS have just been helping to make sharing bank data more convenient for customers. So I think as a result of open banking, we've seen an increase in partnerships from enterprises with fintechs. And so part of that's open banking and the desire for banks to commercialize their open APIs. Part of it might be due to COVID and digital user engagement. And then there's also like an industry piece. If you're not familiar, the UK FinTech Delivery Panel launched a FinTech Pledge to enable enhanced collaboration between banks and leading FinTech firms. And so just setting like global leading standards to establish kind of these partnerships. It's been signed by the 5 leading banks in the UK. And so I think that also has contributed to this momentum around this sort of partnership element. And we do a lot of work. I mentioned our partner network and some of the ways that we support customers to kind of drive some of these connections. And then in Australia, we're actually working with a company called Trend Micro, and they have a cloud conformity project. And they offer Australia's first consumer data right open banking. I think it's an automated compliance check. And so the solution on AWS is designed to simplify your ability to create and launch secure open banking services. And they also kind of streamline the compliance process and reduce the costs around that. So we've been sort of partnering in different ways to just make it easier for our customers to implement open, to kind of comply with the new regulations and implement open banking.
So was that UK specific?
The UK and Australia is where we've been most focused, but we're starting to see it. We're seeing some of it in Canada, and just sort of this idea of open APIs and having access to and sharing of data. The consumer owning their data has been, I think, a trend that will just continue.
Absolutely. Okay, so we have come to the end of the webinar. Time flies. And so yeah, we've learned that the move to the cloud has been happening for a long time. It's been accelerated by this new normal and shift to remote working. Fintechs are leading the change, and are cloud native, as Kathryn's seen in her work, due to the customer centricity and the ability to scale up and down very quickly and easily at low costs. But let's not forget about the incumbents that are catching up. And here it's very much about breaking those barriers, such as perception of lack of security and mindset shift and legacy systems. And we've seen in the news, I think, and on a day-to-day that financial grade cloud computing exists and that banks have really change to integrate cloud in all of their strategies. So a lot has happened in the space. We've also learned that our audience really cares about the security and the latency of cloud connectivity. It's good to hear. So Kathryn, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure to discuss with you, and thank you everyone for attending, and see you soon.
Thank you.